During Thanksgiving, my mother said your sister's wedding was amazing. When's yours? I answered, already had mine. You received invitations. Stunned silence. Dad, we never received them. I took out delivery receipts. All signed for. Now I know who's responsible. That Thanksgiving, a single conversation blew up my entire world. I never expected to expose my sister Khloe's 4-year-old secret at the dinner table, but once it started, there was no turning back. The golden turkey sat untouched, surrounded by steaming sweet potato casserole and glistening china plates, all meticulously arranged. From the outside, it was a picture of perfect festivity, which, looking back, should have been my first chilling clue. An unspoken tension already hummed beneath the surface, a fragile piece waiting to break. Then Brenda, my mother, started, her voice hitting that particular pitch she reserved for topics she'd clearly rehearsed. Khloe's wedding last spring turned out beautifully. The flowers were gorgeous, and her dress fit like a dream. When can we start planning yours, Sarah? I'd been cutting into my green beans when she spoke. The knife paused mid-slice. 4 years. 4 years had passed since my wedding to Michael. 4 years since I'd mailed those invitations with my own trembling hands. 4 years of deflecting questions about why my family hadn't attended. Why our photo album showed his relatives filling both sides of the church. I already got married, Mom, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. You received an invitation. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. Robert, my father, set down his fork with a soft clink that seemed thunderous in the quiet. James, Khloe's husband, stopped chewing. Their 2 kids, Lily and Noah, who'd been fighting over the last dinner roll, went completely still. We never got any invitation, sweetheart, Dad said slowly. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. You know we would have been there. We would have. Something inside me just cracked. For 4 years, I'd carried the weight of their absence. I'd walked down that aisle with Michael's Uncle David because my own father wasn't there. I'd watched Diane, Michael's mother, help me with my veil in the bridal room, her kindness somehow making the emptiness worse. Every single congratulations had felt hollow because the people who'd raised me hadn't bothered to show up. You did get them, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected, almost chillingly calm. I have proof. I pulled out my phone, my hands barely shaking. The screenshots had lived in a folder I'd labeled simply evidence because even then, some part of me knew this day would come. Delivery confirmations from the postal service filled my screen. Each one showed the same address, the house where I'd grown up, where Brenda and Robert still lived. May 20th, 4 years ago, I read aloud. Signature, C. Miller. Khloe went white. Actually white, like someone had drained the blood straight from her face. She'd still been using her maiden name back then, hadn't officially changed it until after her own wedding that August. That's impossible, Brenda said, but her eyes had already shifted toward my sister, a flicker of dawning horror. Khloe wouldn't. She couldn't have. There's more, I continued, swiping to the next screenshot. Second invitation, sent 2 weeks later because I thought maybe the first got lost. June 2nd. Signed for by C. Miller again. I can explain, Khloe started, her voice a desperate whisper. Can you? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Can you explain why you signed for my wedding invitations and apparently threw them away? Can you explain why you let me believe for 4 years that my own parents chose not to come to my wedding? Dad's chair scraped backward. He stood up slowly, his face transforming from confused to furious in seconds. Khloe, please tell me she's wrong. My sister's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Her husband, James, had frozen with his napkin halfway to his mouth. Their daughter, Lily, who was 7 now, started crying, sensing the adult tension, even if she couldn't understand it. Noah, only 4, looked confused by his sister's tears. I was getting married, Khloe finally whispered. My wedding was that same summer. Brenda and Robert were already stressed about money and planning, and then your invitation showed up talking about this big church ceremony and a reception at the Grandview Ballroom. She swallowed hard. I just thought, you thought what? I demanded. The green beans on my plate had gone cold. Everything had gone cold. That you could just erase my wedding? Pretend it wasn't happening? You were always Dad's favorite, she said, and suddenly her voice had shifted from apologetic to defensive. Everything you did was special. Your art projects went on the fridge. Your report cards got celebrated. When you said you were engaged, Brenda started talking about saving extra for your wedding before I'd even set a date. So, you sabotaged mine? I couldn't process what I was hearing. You let me think my parents didn't love me enough to show up for 4 years. Brenda had started crying. Dad stood behind his chair, gripping the backrest so hard his knuckles had gone white. Lily and Noah were both crying now, and James had the decency to look absolutely mortified by his wife's confession. I didn't think it through, Khloe said desperately. I panicked. My wedding was in August and yours was in July, and I just kept thinking about how you'd show me up again. How your wedding would be the one everyone talked about. So, when the invitations came, I signed for them and I threw them away. Both times, I said flatly. Both times, she confirmed in a whisper. The admission hung in the air like smoke. I could feel my heartbeat in my temples, a steady throb that matched the rage building in my chest. Years of confusion suddenly clicked into place like puzzle pieces I'd been trying to force into the wrong spots. Do you remember what you told me when I called asking if they'd arrived? My voice had gone quiet, which somehow felt more dangerous than yelling. You said, and I quote, "Yeah, Brenda and Robert got them. They're really busy with work stuff right now." You looked me in the eye and lied. Khloe's face crumpled further. I know. I remember exactly what I said because I've replayed the conversation 1,000 times. Just that conversation? I asked, because there were others. There was the time I called Brenda's cell and you answered. Said she was in the shower, but you'd have her call me back about wedding details. She never called. There was the time I texted Robert asking if he'd gotten fitted for a tux yet, and you texted back from his phone saying he'd handle it. There was the bridal shower I tried to plan where you told me Brenda said she couldn't make those dates work. Each memory felt like pulling shrapnel from an old wound. James had gone pale listening to the litany of deceptions. Even Khloe's kids had stopped crying, sensing something bigger than a simple argument was unfolding. How many times? I demanded. How many times did you intercept my calls, my texts, my attempts to include our parents in my wedding? I don't know, Khloe whispered. A lot. Maybe a dozen times. I deleted messages. I made excuses. I told you they were supportive but busy. Whenever you asked. Brenda made a sound like she'd been punched. You used my phone? You answered for me? You left it lying around, Khloe said defensively, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I'm sorry. I know that's not an excuse. I violated your privacy and Sarah's trust. She trailed off, apparently running out of ways to explain the inexplicable. Dad's grip on the chair had loosened slightly, but his face remained stony. What about the calls Sarah mentioned? When did those happen? Different times, I said, pulling up my phone records. See, June 8th, I called Brenda's number, talked for 6 minutes. Except it wasn't Brenda, was it? Khloe shook her head miserably. June 15th, texted Robert about meeting Michael's family. Got a response that said, sounds good. Proud of you, kiddo. Dad hasn't called me kiddo since I was 12. Dad's expression shifted from angry to devastated. I would have moved meetings to be there. I would have canceled client dinners. I would have done anything. I know that now, I said. But I didn't know it then. I thought you were being polite through Khloe because you didn't approve of Michael or didn't think I was ready for marriage or some other reason I couldn't figure out. There was even a voicemail, I continued, remembering another detail. I called the house phone because nobody was answering cells. Left a long message about the wedding venue and the date and how much I wanted you both there. Did you delete that, too? Khloe nodded. I heard it when I was house-sitting that weekend you went to that conference. I erased it before Brenda and Robert got home. Did anyone else know? Dad's voice could have cut glass. Did James know? I swear I didn't know, James said quickly, hands up like Dad might hit him. I thought Sarah just wanted a small wedding without family. That's what Khloe told me. Brenda shook her head frantically, mascara starting to run. I would never have allowed this. Sarah, baby, you have to believe me. I wanted you there, I said, and my voice finally cracked. I wanted Robert to walk me down the aisle. I wanted Brenda to help me get ready. I wanted my sister to be my maid of honor. Instead, I got strangers and Michael's family, and I smiled through the whole thing because I didn't want anyone to know how much it hurt that you all chose not to come. We didn't choose anything, Dad said hoarsely. We were robbed of walking our daughter down the aisle by someone we trusted. Khloe's face crumpled. Daddy, please. I made a mistake. I was 24 and stupid and jealous, and I've regretted it every single day since. Have you? The question came out bitter because in 4 years you never told them the truth. You let me carry this. You watched me make excuses at family gatherings about why my wedding photos didn't include any of you. You sat through your wedding planning with Brenda and Robert and never once mentioned that I'd already tried to have them at mine. I was scared, she sobbed. I was heartbroken, I shot back. Do you know what it's like to walk down the aisle alone? Well, not alone. Michael's uncle David walked me because my own father was supposedly too busy or too indifferent to show up. I had to tell myself stories about why you all weren't there. Maybe you were sick. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe I'd done something to upset you all without realizing it. Brenda had her face in her hands now. I should have called. I should have asked about the wedding planning. I kept waiting for you to bring it up, and when you didn't, I thought maybe you were having second thoughts. I thought you'd tell us when you were ready. I sent 2 separate sets of invitations, I said. I called and left voicemails asking if they'd arrived. Khloe told me she'd checked with you and that you'd received them. All eyes turned to Khloe. I answered your calls, she admitted. I told you I'd talked to Brenda and Robert. I lied about everything. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That maybe you'd postpone or something. That maybe you'd have a small ceremony and do a bigger one later. I didn't plan this out. It just kept spiraling. My wedding wasn't a trial run, I said coldly. It was my actual wedding. The one that counted. The one where Michael and I promised our lives to each other in front of God and everyone who actually bothered to show up. Sarah, please, Khloe begged. I'll do anything to make this right. You can't make this right, I told her. That day is gone. Those moments are gone. I'll never get to see Dad cry when he gives me away. Brenda will never get to fix my veil. You destroyed something that can't be rebuilt. James had wrapped his arms around his crying children. The turkey continued to cool on the table, gravy congealing. Someone's phone was buzzing repeatedly in the other room, but nobody moved to answer it. I think we should leave, James said quietly to Khloe. This isn't the time or place. No, Dad said sharply. You don't get to run away from this. Sarah deserves answers. Sarah deserves an actual explanation, not just tears and excuses. Khloe wiped her eyes with a napkin that left little white pieces stuck to her mascara. What else do you want me to say? I was jealous. I've always been jealous of Sarah. She got better grades without trying. She got into her first choice college while I barely graduated. She met Michael and fell in love while I was still dating losers. And then she got engaged and I'd just gotten engaged to James, too. And for once, I wanted something to be about me. Your wedding was about you, I said. Nobody competed with that. I came. I smiled. I gave you a mixer from your registry and a generous check because I wanted you to be happy. I danced with Lily and Noah, played games with them during the reception, and told everyone what a beautiful bride you were. What did you give me? Sabotage and lies. Your wedding was in July, she said weakly. Mine was in August. Everyone would have been talked out about weddings by the time mine happened. You always take up all the oxygen in every room. Then you should have talked to me, I said. You should have told me you were worried about timing. We could have worked something out. Maybe I would have moved my date. Maybe we would have figured out how to celebrate both. Instead, you chose to destroy something precious to me because you couldn't handle the idea of sharing attention. The weight of those lost possibilities settled over the room. I thought about the version of events that could have existed if Khloe had just been honest. Michael and I had been flexible about dates. We'd chosen July because the venue had availability, not because it was particularly meaningful. If Khloe had asked, if she'd explained her concerns like a rational adult, we probably would have happily moved it to September or even the following spring. Did you enjoy your wedding? I asked suddenly. Was it everything you wanted? Khloe looked confused by the question. Yes, it was beautiful. You were there. I said simply. I stood in your receiving line and complimented your dress. I gave a toast at the rehearsal dinner about how happy I was for you and James. I made sure the photographer got good shots of your cake cutting. I did all of that while believing my own parents had chosen to skip my wedding just 6 weeks earlier. James closed his eyes. Oh, God. Yeah, I said. I smiled through your entire wedding while my heart was broken. I watched Dad walk you down the aisle and wondered what I'd done to not deserve that same moment. I saw Mom crying happy tears during your vows and assumed she just loved you more than she loved me. Stop, Khloe begged. Please stop. Why? The question came out harsh. Does it hurt to hear? Does it make you uncomfortable to realize what your jealousy cost me? Because I lived with that pain for 4 years, Khloe. For years of thinking I wasn't enough for my own family. Brenda had composed herself slightly, though her mascara was ruined beyond repair. What else did we miss? Besides the ceremony and reception? Everything, I said simply. The engagement party Michael's parents threw where his whole family came, but mine didn't. The dress shopping trips where I pretended I wanted to go alone. The cake tasting where it was just me and Michael because I convinced myself you all were too busy. The rehearsal dinner where I made excuses about why my family couldn't make it from out of town even though you lived 20 minutes away. I pulled up more photos on my phone, ones I hadn't shown them yet. Here's me at the bridal salon with Michael's mom, Diane, and his Aunt Valerie. Here's the bachelorette party his sister Olivia organized because I told everyone mine couldn't come. Here's the morning of the wedding where his cousin did my makeup because I didn't have a mother or sister to help. Each photo was another small knife. Brenda and Robert looked at them with expressions of increasing anguish. Khloe had her face in her hands now, shoulders shaking with sobs that no longer garnered any sympathy from me. Brenda had stopped crying. Her face had settled into something hard and disappointed. You're going to apologize to your sister properly. I just did, Khloe protested. No, Brenda said firmly. You explained yourself. You made excuses. You cried, but you didn't actually apologize for the harm you caused. You didn't acknowledge what you took from her, from us, from this family. Dad nodded slowly. You stole something from all of us. I'll never get to walk my daughter down the aisle. Your mother will never get those mother of the bride moments. We missed everything because you were too selfish and cowardly to deal with your own insecurities like an adult. I'm sorry, Khloe said, and finally she sounded like she meant it. Sarah, I'm so deeply sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I took something beautiful from you because I was scared and petty, and I don't know how to make it right. You can't, I repeated. But you can start by telling the truth to everyone. Aunt Carol, Aunt Susan, Grandma Eleanor, all our cousins, everyone who's asked me over the years why my parents weren't at my wedding. You're going to tell them what you did. Her face went pale again. That's humiliating. Good, I said simply. You've humiliated me for 4 years. You let me field questions and pitying looks. You let people think my parents didn't care about me. Now you get to explain why that was a lie. Sarah, Brenda started, but I shook my head. No, this is non-negotiable. She either tells the truth or I will. But the truth is coming out either way. James cleared his throat. She'll do it. We'll call everyone and explain. Right, Khloe? Khloe nodded miserably. Her kids had stopped crying and were just staring at their mother like they'd never seen her before. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe this was their first glimpse of the person behind the mom who made them lunch and braided their hair. I want to see the photos, Brenda said suddenly. From your wedding. I want to see everything we missed. I don't know if that's a good idea, I started. Please, she said. Let me see my daughter in her wedding dress. Let me see the ceremony and the reception and all the moments I should have been there for. I hesitated, then pulled up the album on my phone. Brenda and Robert crowded close, scrolling through images of a day that felt like it had happened a lifetime ago. There I was in my dress, white lace with a sweetheart neckline and a train that had taken 2 people to bustle. There was Michael in his tux, grinning like he'd won the lottery. There were his parents beaming in the front row. There was the empty space where my family should have been. You were so beautiful, Brenda whispered. Michael's Uncle David did a good job walking you down, Robert said, and his voice broke completely. But it should have been me. Yes, I agreed. It should have been. We sat there in that ruined Thanksgiving, scrolling through wedding photos none of them had seen. Khloe watched from across the table, her face a mixture of guilt and grief. Her kids had gone into the living room to watch TV, their little voices drifting back occasionally with cartoon sound effects. I have an idea, Robert said finally. What if we did a vow renewal? A proper ceremony where we could all be there. We could do it right this time. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to reclaim what had been stolen, but another part knew that wouldn't actually fix anything. The original wound would still be there, just covered with new bandaging. Maybe someday, I said carefully. But right now, I need time. I need to process that my sister actively sabotaged one of the most important days of my life. I need to figure out what our relationship looks like after this. That's fair, Brenda said softly. Take all the time you need. What about Thanksgiving? Khloe's voice was small. Do you want us to go? I looked at her across the table with her red-rimmed eyes and her guilty expression. For years ago, I would have done anything to have her as my maid of honor. For years ago, I'd loved her enough to overlook decades of petty jealousy and competition. For years ago, I'd still believed we could be the kind of sisters who supported each other. Yeah, I said, finally. I think you should go. James gathered up their kids while Khloe collected their coats. The children were confused about leaving early, asking questions their parents deflected with vague answers about not feeling well. Brenda packed up plates of food for them with the mechanical movements of someone going through motions because she didn't know what else to do. At the door, Khloe turned back. I really am sorry, Sarah. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I mean it. I believe you're sorry, I said. I don't know if I forgive you yet. That's going to take time, if it happens at all. She nodded and left, James ushering their kids into the cold November evening. Through the window, I watched their car pull away, taillights disappearing around the corner. What do we do now? Brenda asked. The three of us stood in the foyer, surrounded by the detritus of a holiday gone wrong. The table still held most of the uneaten food. Dishes needed washing. Someone should probably put away the leftovers before they spoiled. We talk, Robert said. We figure out how to rebuild what Khloe broke. If Sarah will let us. I want to, I admitted. I've missed you both so much. But I need you to understand how much this hurt. How much it still hurts. Tell us, Brenda said. Tell us everything. So I did. We moved to the living room where we wouldn't have to look at the abandoned Thanksgiving feast. I told them about choosing my dress alone because Khloe had claimed she was busy every time I'd invited her shopping. I told them about Michael's mother stepping in to help when I'd needed someone to lace up my corset. I told them about the rehearsal dinner where his family had made toasts while my side of the room sat empty. I told them about lying awake the night before my wedding, convincing myself that maybe they'd surprise me and show up anyway. They listened to all of it. Brenda cried again, quieter this time. Robert kept apologizing even though none of this was his fault. By the time I finished, darkness had fallen outside and the house felt cold despite the heater running. We should have pushed harder, Brenda said. When you stopped talking about wedding planning, I should have asked why. I should have insisted on being involved. I thought you didn't want to be, I said. When the invitations went unanswered, I figured you were making a statement about Michael or about me getting married young or something. I went through every conversation we'd had looking for clues about what I'd done wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Robert said firmly. This was all Khloe. Her jealousy, her lies, her choice. I know that now, I said. But for 4 years, I didn't. For 4 years, I thought my parents didn't love me enough to show up for my wedding day. We love you more than anything, Brenda said fiercely. Both of you equally. If Khloe felt otherwise, that's something I need to examine about how I raised her. But please don't ever doubt that we would have moved heaven and earth to be at your wedding if we'd known. I believe you, I said, and found that I meant it. We talked until late, ordering pizza when we realized nobody wanted to eat the Thanksgiving food that reminded us of the disaster this day had become. They asked about Michael, about our life together, about our apartment in Atlanta. I told them about his job at the engineering firm and mine at the marketing company. I told them about our cat, Pumpkin, who knocked things off counters just to watch them fall. I told them about our plans to buy a house next year, maybe start thinking about kids. All the conversations we should have had over the past 4 years spilled out in a rush. Brenda and Robert soaked up every detail like they were starving for information about my life. Maybe they were. Maybe Khloe's lies had created distance I hadn't even realized was there. Can we meet Michael? Brenda asked officially. I mean, as your parents, not just random people at a grocery store. He'd like that, I said. He's been patient about the family situation, but I know it bothers him that you weren't at the wedding. He thinks he did something to offend you. God, no, Robert said. From everything you've told us, he sounds like a good man. We'd be proud to have him as a son-in-law. We'd be proud to tell people our daughter married him. Something in my chest loosened at those words. For 4 years, I'd carried the weight of my parents' supposed rejection. Hearing that they actually wanted to be part of my life, that they were proud of my choices, felt like setting down a boulder I'd been carrying up a hill. Dinner next week, I suggested. At our place. Nothing fancy, just the 4 of us. We'll bring dessert, Brenda said immediately. And maybe some of those old family photos you asked about years back. I've been meaning to put together albums. I'd like that, I said. Robert hugged me then. The kind of crushing embrace that made my ribs ache. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry we missed your special day. I'm sorry we let you down, even if it wasn't our choice. I'm sorry you spent 4 years thinking we didn't care. You're here now, I said into his shoulder. That has to count for something. When I finally left their house, the night air smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves. My car started on the first try, which felt like a small miracle after everything else. The drive home gave me time to process, to let the evening's revelations settle into something I could carry. Michael was waiting when I got home, sprawled on our couch with pumpkin draped across his lap. He took one look at my face and held out his arms. I collapsed into them gratefully. That bad? He asked. Actually, I said slowly. It might end up being good eventually. After a lot of therapy and some serious conversations. I told him everything. He listened quietly, occasionally interjecting with questions or observations. When I got to the part about Khloe's confession, his jaw clenched hard enough I heard his teeth grind. I should have known something was wrong, he said. The way you deflected questions about your family. The way you never wanted to visit them. I was protecting you from my dysfunction, I admitted. Or what I thought was dysfunction. Turns out it was just Khloe. Do you want to do the vow renewal your dad suggested? He asked. Maybe, I said. Not anytime soon, but maybe eventually. When things have healed a bit, it might be nice to have pictures with my parents there. To let your Uncle David be a regular guest instead of standing in for my absent father. Whatever you want, Michael said. I married you in a courthouse or a cathedral. The venue doesn't matter. You do. We sat there in comfortable silence, pumpkin purring between us. Outside, the neighborhood was settling in for the night. Lights clicked off in windows. Cars pulled into driveways. Families gathered around their own tables. Hopefully with fewer explosions than ours had experienced. My phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. Thank you for staying and talking. We love you so much. See you next week. I typed back a heart emoji and set the phone aside. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to navigate this new reality where my parents knew the truth and Khloe had to face consequences for her actions. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide whether I wanted to pursue a relationship with my sister or whether some betrayals were too fundamental to overcome. But tonight, I just sat with my husband and our cat in our little apartment and felt grateful that the truth had finally come out. For years of carrying that weight had left me exhausted in ways I hadn't fully recognized. Having it lifted, even in such a dramatic fashion, felt like I could breathe properly for the first time since my wedding day. The weeks that followed were complicated. Khloe did as she promised and called our relatives to explain what had happened. The family responded with a mixture of shock and anger. Aunt Carol called me crying, apologizing for believing that I'd simply chosen not to include family in my wedding. Grandma Eleanor sent a scathing letter to Khloe about family loyalty and trust. Cousins reached out through social media asking for wedding photos they could finally see. Brenda and Robert came to dinner the following week as planned. Michael had stressed about it, cleaning the apartment 3 times and changing his shirt 4 times before they arrived. But the evening went smoothly. Robert and Michael bonded over a shared love of terrible action movies. Brenda admired the way I decorated our space and offered some curtains she'd been storing that would match our color scheme perfectly. It felt normal in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Just a daughter having her parents over for dinner with her husband. Simple and ordinary and perfect. Khloe and I didn't talk for a while. She sent texts occasionally, apologizing again or asking how I was doing. I responded politely but distantly. Some wounds needed time to even begin healing, and I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine between us. James called once to apologize for his wife's behavior. He sounded genuinely devastated by what had happened. I told him I didn't blame him and that I hoped he and the kids were okay. He admitted that Khloe had started therapy to work through her jealousy issues and that they were doing marriage counseling, too. I wished him well and meant it. 3 months after Thanksgiving, Brenda suggested having lunch with just her and Khloe. A chance for us to talk in a neutral environment with a mediator present. I thought about declining, but Michael encouraged me to at least consider it. You don't have to forgive her, he said. But maybe hearing her out could give you closure one way or another. So, I agreed. We met at a cafe downtown on a cold February afternoon. Khloe looked thinner than I remembered, her face drawn with stress. Brenda sat between us like a referee at a boxing match. Thank you for coming, Khloe said quietly. Mom asked me to, I said honestly. I'm here for her, not for you. She flinched but nodded. Fair enough. I've been working with a therapist trying to understand why I did what I did, why I was so threatened by you. And? I prompted. She says it stems from childhood stuff, feeling like I always came in second. But that's an explanation, not an excuse. You didn't deserve what I did to you, no matter how insecure I felt. No, I didn't, I agreed. Is there anything I can do? She asked desperately. Anything at all to make this even slightly better? I thought about it while sipping my coffee. What did I want from her? An apology? I had that multiple times. An explanation? That too. Consequences? She'd face those from the family. What was left? I want you to be genuinely happy for me, I said finally. Not fake happy where you smile and seethe inside. Actually happy when good things happen in my life. Can you do that? I want to, she said. I'm working on it in therapy. Learning to celebrate other people's success instead of seeing it as my failure. Then start with this, I said. Michael and I are buying a house. We close next month. I'm telling you this before we tell the rest of the family. Can you be happy for us? I watched her face carefully. Something flickered there, some old familiar jealousy. But then she took a breath and smiled. And this time it looked almost genuine. That's wonderful, she said. Congratulations, both of you. You deserve a beautiful home together. Thank you, I said, and found myself meaning it. We didn't magically become close again. The trust she'd shattered would take years to rebuild, if it ever fully did. But we started texting occasionally. She sent a housewarming gift when we moved in. A nice picture frame with a note that said simply, "For making new memories." Her kids drew us congratulations pictures that we hung on our refrigerator. On our 4th anniversary, Michael surprised me with a vow renewal. Nothing elaborate, just a small ceremony in our backyard with close friends and family. This time, Robert walked me down the makeshift aisle between rows of folding chairs. Brenda fixed my hair when the wind messed it up. Even Khloe attended, staying quietly in the back with James and their kids. Afterward, during the tiny reception, Robert pulled me aside. His eyes were wet behind his glasses. Thank you for letting me do this, he said. It doesn't erase missing the first time, but it means everything to be here now. You are always here, I told him. Just not physically. But you raised me to be someone who could stand up for herself, who could demand the truth. That was you at my wedding even when you weren't there in person. He hugged me hard enough to wrinkle my dress. Brenda joined us and we stood there in a family embrace while the party continued around us. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Khloe watching with something that might have been longing or regret or both. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to being real sisters. Maybe we wouldn't. Either way, I'd learned that I could build a family from the people who showed up for me, blood relation or not. Michael's Uncle David was in attendance, naturally, holding court by the cake table. Michael's parents fussed over the flower arrangements. Friends from work mixed with college roommates and neighbors. This was my family now. The people who chose to be here, who celebrated my happiness without resentment, who showed up when it mattered. If Khloe wanted to be part of that someday, genuinely and wholly, the door wasn't completely closed. But she'd have to prove she could handle it, that she'd really changed. For now, I had everything I needed. A husband who loved me, parents who were making up for lost time, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to demand the truth even when it hurt. That Thanksgiving dinner had been the worst holiday of my life. But it had also set me free from 4 years of carrying someone else's lies. And that, I decided as Michael spun me around our backyard dance floor while our loved ones cheered, was worth every painful moment. What part of your life would change if you finally confronted a difficult truth?